500 years, 16 generations of one family. Firearms carried by the armies of Napoleon, by American soldiers in 2 world wars, by U.S. troops from Vietnam to the Gulf, all made by the same company, the oldest continuously operating industrial dynasty on Earth. And on September 1, 2025, that company let its Maryland firearms license expire without renewal. No press conference, no farewell statement, just a quiet expiration date on a federal document and the final, complete severing of a 48-year relationship with a state that spent the last decade making clear it no longer wanted the business. Hey everyone, welcome back. It is 1526. In the small town of Garden Val Trompia, in the foothills of the Italian Alps, a gunsmith named Bartolomeo Beretta receives a payment of 296 ducats for 480 arquebus barrels delivered to the arsenal of Venice. It is the oldest recorded commercial transaction in the history of firearms manufacturing. The company that begins with that receipt will survive the collapse of the Venetian Republic, 2 world wars, the rise and fall of fascism, and 131 American presidential elections. 16 generations of the same family will run it without interruption. It will become the official sidearm supplier of the United States Armed Forces, providing the M9 pistol carried by American soldiers, sailors, and Marines to the Pentagon from 1985 onward. To make that happen, the company needs an American manufacturing base. In 1977, it builds one in Accokeek, Maryland, a small community in Prince George's County, south of Washington, D.C. For almost 4 decades, Beretta manufactures firearms at that facility: military pistols, law enforcement, sidearms, commercial sporting guns, employing hundreds of Maryland workers. The address on 17,601 Beretta Drive, a road the county named after the company, is the physical presence of 500 years of history on American soil. Then, in 2013, the Maryland General Assembly passes the Firearms Safety Act. The version that clears the state Senate contains a provision that would make it illegal for Beretta to manufacture, store, or even import into Maryland the products it makes and sells around the world. The company fights it, wins some of it back, but not all. And on July 22, 2014, Beretta's general manager makes an announcement. The guns will be made in Tennessee from now on. I'm talking about Beretta Fabbrica d'Armi Pietro, Beretta SBA, founded in 1526. The world's oldest continuously operating industrial dynasty and the longest-running family-owned manufacturing company on Earth, whose American subsidiary, Beretta USA Corp., has maintained a presence at 17,601 Beretta Drive in Accokeek, Maryland since 1977. Beretta is not a mid-size gun. It is the standard sidearm supplier to the United States Armed Forces, the manufacturer of the M9 pistol issued to American service members, and the parent company of Benelli, Seiko, and Stoeger. Its parent company has survived in the same family for 5 centuries. Nothing about it is accidental. And on September 1, 2025, Beretta USA Corporation's federal firearms license at 17,601 Beretta Drive, Accokeek, Maryland, license number 852033115J02170, expired, without renewal. The FFL expiration is not an administrative oversight. A federal firearms license is the foundational legal authorization that allows any entity to manufacture, transfer, or deal in firearms on American soil. Letting one expire is not an accident. A company that has navigated the regulatory requirements of selling military sidearms to the Pentagon for 4 decades, that has filled contracts for the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps, does not simply forget to renew its ATF paperwork. The expiration on September 1, 2025, is the company's final legal act in the state of Maryland. Manufacturing had already left in 2015, and now, 1 decade later, the last operational firearms authorization in the state is gone. No fanfare, no statement, no press response from Governor Wes Moore, who had signed additional gun industry accountability legislation into law in May 2024, making Maryland's regulatory posture toward firearms companies more restrictive than ever. The FFL expiration is the punctuation mark on a sentence Maryland began writing in 2013. It is the cleanest possible verdict. A 500-year-old company, on American soil since 1977, deciding that it no longer needs the legal right to operate in this particular state. That is not a logistical update. That is a final answer. So, whether you live in Maryland, work in manufacturing, or just pay taxes anywhere in this country, what's unfolding right now in Annapolis matters to you. Because this pattern has a very predictable ending, and we've seen it play out before. This is Zinc Tribune, and this is where we follow the money. Subscribe and hit that like button if you want more of this. And here's my question for the comments. When a company that has survived 5 centuries of European wars, revolutions, and political upheaval decides Maryland is too hostile to maintain an active firearms license, at what point does a state government have to accept that its own policies are the variable? Drop it below. Let's get into it. Bartolomeo Beretta was paid 296 ducats on October 3, 1526, for 485 gun barrels delivered to the Arsenal of Venice. That receipt, still in existence, is the founding document of the oldest continuously operating industrial company in the world. Not just the oldest the oldest surviving family-owned industrial business of any kind on Earth. 16 generations, 5 centuries, 1 family. Gardenval, Trompia, Italy. Over those centuries, Beretta supplied firearms to the Spanish infantry in the 16th century, to Napoleon's army in the early 19th, to Allied forces in both world wars. In 1985, the Model 92 later designated the M9, when the United States military's competition for a new standard sidearm, beating out competitors from SIG, Sauer, Smith & Wesson, and others. That contract brought Beretta to Accokeek, Maryland, where the company established its American manufacturing and administrative headquarters in 1977. The Accokeek facility made M9 pistols for the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. It employed hundreds of workers in Prince George's County. The county road leading to the facility was named Beretta Drive. The company never asked Maryland for tax incentives, never asked for special treatment. Just made guns in southern Maryland for 48 years until Maryland's politics made it untenable. Manufacturing departed in 2015. The administrative headquarters remained, and then, on September 1, 2025, the federal firearms license at 17,601 Beretta Drive was allowed to expire. Beretta's departure from Maryland manufacturing was not an isolated event. It was the first visible movement in a years-long industry migration out of hostile regulatory environments. Magpul Industries, manufacturer of firearm accessories and polymer magazines, exited Colorado in 2014 after the state passed a ban on standard capacity magazines. The company moved its manufacturing to Wyoming and its headquarters to Texas, taking with it an estimated $9 million in annual tax revenue and hundreds of jobs. Stag Arms, a Connecticut-based rifle manufacturer, relocated its operations entirely to Cheyenne, Wyoming in 2019, citing Connecticut's regulatory environment as incompatible with the company's future. Weatherby, a California rifle maker with over 70 years of history in the state, moved its headquarters and operations to Sheridan, Wyoming, in 2019, with its CEO stating plainly that California's anti-gun policies no longer aligned with the company's values or its ability to attract and retain a workforce comfortable with the firearms industry. Beretta, Magpul, Stag Arms, Weatherby, all gone, all landing in Wyoming, Tennessee, Texas, and Georgia states that, in their own words, welcome the business. The states that made them are waving them goodbye. Maryland's corporate income tax rate sits at 8.25%, the 13th highest in the country. Its top personal income tax rate is 5.75% at the state level, among the highest in the Mid-Atlantic, on top of a 3.2% county tax in Prince George's County, where Accokeek is located. Tennessee has no state income tax, 0. Its corporate tax applies only to investment income and sits at a flat rate. Its manufacturing environment was actively recruited by Governor Bill Haslam, who in 2014 welcomed Beretta's Gallatin facility with a statement calling it a great match. Meanwhile, Maryland closed a $3.3 billion budget deficit in the 2025 legislative session through a combination of spending cuts and $1.68 billion in new taxes and fees, the single largest tax and fee package in the state's history. Nonpartisan fiscal analysts project that Maryland's structural budget problems were not resolved by the 2025 session and that the state faces further shortfalls into the late 2020s. Stack that on top of the documented departure of Beretta's manufacturing in 2015, the FFL expiration in September and October 2025, the state's ongoing gun industry liability legislation, and the complete absence of any public policy response to the decade-long departure sequence, and the picture is complete. A state that needed $1.68 billion in new revenue in 2025. Allowed a relationship with one of the most prestigious manufacturers in American history to end without attempting to stop it. For a company managing 5 centuries of institutional credibility and a U.S. military supply relationship, Maryland's policy environment versus Tennessee's isn't sentiment. That's arithmetic. I'll call her Linda, not her real name. But her situation is real for hundreds of people across Prince George's County and the communities surrounding Accokeek. Linda is she worked in precision machining, not at Beretta, at one of the small Maryland suppliers whose work was tied, directly or indirectly, to the manufacturing contracts that ran through the Accokeek facility. Tooling, machined components, calibration services. When Beretta's Maryland production line shut down in 2015, her employer lost its largest customer. Her employer survived, barely, by finding new contracts in the defense manufacturing corridor running from Virginia south. But those contracts are in Virginia. The work that used to happen in Maryland, that used to support a subcontracting ecosystem across southern Prince George's County, is now happening somewhere else. Linda still has a job, but it's 40 minutes further from home. and the manufacturing cluster that made her work stable, the cluster that grew up around a facility on a road named Beretta Drive, is gone, and no one in Annapolis has proposed a plan to replace it. She's not losing her job this month, but she's watching the floor get a little thinner every single year, and she knows exactly what that eventually leads to. A state passes regulatory legislation that makes it legally uncertain for an industry to operate there. The industry's largest company removes its manufacturing operations, citing the possibility of future restrictions. Supporting businesses, suppliers, service providers, subcontractors lose their anchor, customer, and contract base. Jobs migrate to the destination state. The tax base that those jobs supported, income taxes, property taxes on commercial facilities, supply chain economic activity, follows the state's budget, faces growing structural pressure. The state raises taxes and fees to compensate. The remaining businesses in affected industries face a higher cost environment on top of a restrictive regulatory one. More of them calculate the alternative. More of them leave. The administrative and residual functions that stayed after manufacturing departed have less reason to remain. And eventually, a federal firearms license renewal falls due, and nobody files the paperwork. That is a death spiral. Connecticut lost Colt's manufacturing, Stag Arms, and saw the broader firearms manufacturing base that had anchored Hartford's economy for a century thin out and migrate south after the state passed aggressive gun legislation in the wake of Sandy Hook. Colorado lost Magpul and saw millions in annual tax revenue drive west to Wyoming after its magazine capacity ban. In Maryland, which housed the standard sidearm supplier of the United States Armed Forces for 48 years, is watching the final paperwork expire in real time right now.